Video, I will be showing how to set up both an RDS database as well as a Node.js Lambda function. But before I get into how to set up both of these services, I just want to give a brief recap about the premises of this project. So the idea of this project is to create a computer science learning tool that can be used by both incoming students and current students to learn some of the most important terms necessary for them to be successful during their time as a computer science student. And in order to create this application, my group decided to use the AWS services S3, RDS, Lambda, and the API gateway. But as I mentioned earlier, I will only be covering how to do the RDS and the Lambda function itself. So to start with the RDS, you actually have to create an EC2 instance. And in order to do that, you click Launch Instances. And then once you're here, you give your instance a name. I'll just call it test server. And then in the application section, you need to make sure that it's set to Amazon Linux and that it says Amazon Linux 2023 AMI because that is free tier eligible. And then for the architecture, you want to make sure that it's 64-bit and then x86. After that, the instance type needs to be t2.micro because it is, again, within the free tier. And then for the key pair login, you can either create a new key pair if you don't already have one, or if you have one that's already pre-existing, then you can choose that one, like I have right here. And then for the network settings, you'll most likely need to create a new security group. And in doing so, you have to make sure it allows SSH traffic from anywhere, and that it also allows HTTPS as well as HTTP traffic from anywhere on the internet. And then for the configuration storage, you have to make sure that it's set to 30 gigabytes GP3. And then from that point forward, you can launch your instance. But since I already have an instance set up, that is what we will be using for this example. So you click on your instance and then click connect. Scroll down to the bottom, click connect again. Now, once you're in your EC2 instance, there are 6 commands that need to be entered in order to download the Apache web server environment that is needed to run this the RDS database. So I have them written out here just to save time, and I will put them in one by one. First one we have is right here. Make sure to delete all the unnecessary parts of it. And then you hit enter. And as you can see, since I already have it installed, it says nothing to do. But if you don't have it installed, it'll install and then say complete at the very end. Next, we do this one to start the environment. And then the very next one is used to enable the environment. After that, we want to get Apache working with the EC2 instance. And then finally, we want to get that web browser working. For these final 2 right here. Now, once you have that done, you are ready to start up the Postgres environment for your database. So next, before we can go any further, you have to navigate to your RDS dashboard and click Create Database. I have one that we'll use for this example, but I will still walk you through how to create one. So you click on Create Database and make sure it's on Standard Create, and then you're going to want to choose PostgreSQL as the engine type. And then you want to make sure that you choose version 16.3, and that it remains within the free tier. Then you're going to want to give this database a name. Since I already have one created, I'll just call this testDB. And then you're going to want to create a username. I will just leave that alone as Postgres. Then you leave that as self-managed so you can create your own password. So I will stick with the password post25db, and then it's going to ask you to put it in again, post25db. And then you want to make sure it's checked on burstable classes and that it's also on db.t4g.micro. And then you want general purpose SSD GP2 for the storage type, and you want it to be allocated to 20 gigabytes. And then you're going to want to make sure it's connecting to an EC2 compute source. And then you have to choose the EC2 instance you want. Since I already have one created, this is what's going to pop up. The network type is IVP4. And then you want the DB subnet for automatic setup. And then for VPC, you choose one that is already existing. So I will choose this one right here. And then you're going to want to use password authentication because that's how you're going to get in and out of your database in your EC2 instance every single time. And then you want the database insight set to standard and make sure that it's in the free tier. And then you leave everything else as is, and then you will create your database. But like I said, since I already have one created, we'll head back to the dashboard. And here is my database right here. So now that we have that set up, you can go back to your EC2 instance. And what you're going to want to do to get inside of Postgres is to use the following command to enter the default Postgres environment, because for the time being, you won't have an actual database set up. So in order to do that, you use the following command, the following PSQL command. So make sure to get rid of all these extra things right at the end. And then you click enter and it'll ask you to put in your password, and that's where you put in the post 25db. And then you can see that you're inside of the Postgres environment. Now, in order to get to my database, well, first you need to create your database. So the command that you use in order to do this would be create database. And then I called mine compdb. And then you have to make sure to include the semicolon at the end or the command won't work properly. So I'll refresh the page and just show you what my my own database looks like since I already have it created. So I'll just replace Postgres with the name of my actual database, compdb. I enter my password. And as you can see, I'm finally inside of my database. So now I can use the dots. So now that I'm in here, I can create a table. So this would be the command to create the table that will store all of the quiz information. So I will call my table quiz info, just paste that right here. and then I would click enter. But since I already have that created, I will just use the /dt command to show you what that database looks like. So as you can see here, this is the only table that's inside of this database, quiz_info. And that is how you set up that portion of the RDS. So now we are going to deal with Lambda. So in order to create a Lambda function, you click on Create Function. And then for the function name, we're just going to give it a name of test. Make sure it's in, since we're using a Node.js for the function code, make sure it's the most recent version. Make sure the architecture is x86_64, and then you click Create Function. But like I said, since I already have that created, we will click onto this. So this is what the Lambda function looks like right here. And so the problem that you are initially going to run into when you try to enter this Lambda function is that you'll get a runtime module error because the packages for PG and Postgres are not automatically uploaded when you create the Lambda function. The only thing you'll have in there is your index.js file. So in order to go around this problem, you need to go to your command prompt. I'll go right here. And you need to make a directory and where these modules are going to go. I'll just call it demo Postgres. And then I'll cd into demo Postgres. And then once I'm in there, once I've done that, I'm going to open VS Code. And then I'm going to go to File, Open Folder, and then go down to this PC, click on Windows, go to Users, inside of my thing right here, and I will find the folder called Demo Postgres right here. And that's what I'm going to want to open. So I'll open this inside of VS Code. I guess you trust the authors. And then one thing you're going to want to do is to create another folder within this, and I'll just call this, I'll call it test lambda. And then inside of this test lambda function, what you're going to want to do is create a file called index.js. So now that you have the index.js file created, you want to go back to your lambda function, copy and paste the entire thing, go back to your VS Code, paste it, make sure to save, and then you're going to want to open a terminal. Now we're going to download the PG modules needed to run Postgres for this Lambda function. So the very first command you're going to want to enter is npm init-y. As you can see, that has already caused the package.json file to form. And then what you're going to want to do is to do the command npm install pg. As you can see here, it's taking some time to download everything. So as you can see, here they are right here, but it still hasn't appeared within the test lambda file. So what I'm going to do is go back to my folder, open, go to demo Postgres, and then click on test lambda specifically so we can focus on just this one right here. And now I'll do the same steps that I did before. Open up the terminal, do npm init-y. Here's the package.json file, and then we do npm install pg. And there we go. There's the node_modules folder, and then our index.js file. Now, what we're going to need to do next is to zip up specifically the index.js file and the node modules folder, not necessarily the entire test Lambda folder, because if you do that, you will still run into the same exact runtime import module error. So in order to do this, you go back to your command prompt. I'm using Windows PowerShell. I'm already in the demo Postgres folder, so then I'm going to cd into test Lambda since it's inside of that folder. And then what I'm going to want to do is enter the command compress archive -path star -destination, and then I'll pick a name for the zip file. So we'll call it video lambda.zip. And then it's compressing these files into a zip file. And once it's finished, you can see the video_lambda zip right here. So then what you'll want to do is replace the index.js that you have right here. Click on upload from, do zip file, and then you click upload. You go to where you have this zip file stored, which is in users. I'll go be demo Postgres, test Lambda, and then you see the video_lambda function right here. Then you click open, and then you would click save. But since I already have that done, there's no need for me to do that again. And as you can see, once you do that, you have all these node_module files inside of your Lambda. Now, another thing that you're going to want to make sure is under the configuration tab. You need to make sure two things. The first thing is that your Lambda function is underneath the same VPC as your RDS database and your EC2 instance, and that you're under RDS databases, make sure that the database that you just created is up and functional. And these two are very important because if they're not there, then there is no connection happening between the database itself and the Lambda function. So once you do that, there is one more thing that I'd like to point out, and it's this line of code right here called the SSL reject unauthorized false. Now, SSL stands for Secure Sockets Layer, and it is very important for facilitating the security between the browser and the server. Now, the reject unauthorized part of this code deals with determining whether or not Node.js should accept or reject certain information from entering into the RDS. So by default, it's automatically set to true. And in order to get around that, you have to set it to false. So once you have that set up, I'm going to run the test event, but I'll show you what it looks like first before I do. So in the body, we have the name, Tim, the score, 3, and then the total number of questions, which equals 5. So once you save that, and then invoke it, you'll see that the test event succeeds and that the information is correctly sent to the RDS. But in order to make sure that's actually happened properly, you return to your EC2 instance, and then enter the command select star, which is selecting everything from the quiz_info table. And when you do that, you can see at the very bottom with the ID entry of 21, we have Tim with a score of 3 and the total number of questions being 5. So that is how you go about setting up an RDS and a Lambda function, as well as testing the connection between the two services.